Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another edition of the 2024 Sasol New Signatures Art Competition information sessions. My name is Punzo Sidogi, and I'm joined by my colleague, Kate Blanche from the Sasol Art Collection. And today we've got a very special guest joining us, Jenny Pina, who is a trademark litigation specialist or partner at Adams and Adams. And we are really delighted to spend some time with you to talk about issues related to copyright.
Great.
Artists do not want to hear.
Thank you, Jenny, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks,
Nice
Jenny.
to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, artists, that's a little bit of a swear word sometimes for artists. When, of course, the copyright is against them, but hopefully you will unpack some myths for us and really just guide the potential entrants and what any emerging artist that is listening to this through the minefield that is copyright and image use in a contemporary landscape where images are all around us. So before we begin, I'd just like to remind you once again to please download the entry form if you are looking to enter this year's edition of the competition. And again, to just reiterate that the submission dates are the 4th and the 5th of June. So we're looking forward to receiving your artworks and your submissions. And as noted before, today the focus of our talk is really related to copyright. And perhaps just to contextualize this conversation is to note that within the entry form, there are a series of statements there that are meant to guide entrants on how to navigate copyright when it comes to the production of your own work. So that's a starting point. But the purpose of this video is just to perhaps answer some of those questions that some of you might have around how you use images, which images you're supposed to use, and which ones you should kind of stay away from. And also just when it comes to your own creative practice, once you are having your images out there in the public domain, how do you protect those works from copyright infringement? So I'm going to start it off by noting that very recently, as a competition, we had to deal with copyright infringement issue where we received a very interesting email noting that one of the prior entrants who actually was part of the winner circle had used an image which created a copyright infringement situation. And so these are issues that even from our side, we really have to engage with. And Kate, perhaps if you can just, without mentioning any names or providing any detail, just contextualize that situation that we had to deal with recently.
Yes, thank you, Funza. I think it's something that is really actually very, very important for any artist, because artists actually come into the process of art making with the idea of commenting on something, and, often what happens is that, those situations are maybe social, political situations, and they actually use any kind of imagery or, information that's out there, thinking, this is part of their art making, not thinking a little bit further in terms of copyright. And so, yes, this is actually something that we had to deal with. The work in question was eventually, we did have to pay a fine on that. And I think it's just important. It's a very important thing for artists to just realize that there is some kind of a repercussion if you do actually use unlicensed or images that that you haven't asked permission for.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a tricky thing, and I think that's exactly what we want to hear from Jenny is how should an artist navigate that kind of sea?
That's right, and this is what we bring into the conversation, Jenny. So yes, here I am. I'm a young artist. I'm interested in entering the competition. And as Kate has noted, I want to engage in a work that is doing social political commentary. So perhaps I want to create an image of a politician or someone that's in the public domain, and I have access to that image from the internet. How do I go about this Jenny? Yeah.
Well, let's just think about Brett Murray's Spear of the Nation painting. I mean, that's probably one of the most famous social commentaries based on a political figure. So the question really revolves around what do you have the right to use? And if you don't have the right to use it, how do you go about getting the right to use it? And what do you want to use that particular image for? And the difficulty that you have is that everything is available on the internet. You just have to click a photograph of someone and try and use that as your inspiration. Because we're not talking about copying per se, but using that as your inspiration. Because I think that's what artists do. They use social structures, they use political influences, they use other artists' works also. So there's a level of borrowing that I think happens across the spectrum. And I think that's pretty normal, because what is really new and original, that's available nowadays. But the problem with images is particularly concerning because there are different aspects of rights that are affected by the use of an image of someone whose consent you haven't acquired. The first issue is they have personality rights. They have their right to their own personality. They have the right to the use of their own image and the moral right not to have that image distorted in any way. That's the first issue. And the second issue is, depending on where the young artist is acquiring that image, the use of the image that they choose might be an infringement of the copyright, not aside of the personality rights, in the actual image that's being used. So, for example, just to give you a practical example, there's that famous photograph that Sam Nzima took of the Hector Peterson photograph of walking with Hector Peterson. I mean, that image, Sam Nzima claimed copyright ownership in that particular image, and that image spawned a number of artistic works afterwards, including sculptures, other types of works. But that particular image itself was a photograph that Mr. Nzima took when he was employed. Was it the Mail and Guardian? I think I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember. It's many years ago.
But he was a journalist. He was employed as a photographer.
Correct. Yeah. So the works that were derived from that were an infringement of the copyright in that particular image, unless you acquired his consent in order to use that image and to turn it into, whether it was a sculpture, because if you're talking about a photograph is an artistic work, and artistic works are defined in the Copyright Act, which is old and up for redo because lots of things, have changed over time. Covers everything from architectural buildings to paintings to photographs, not things that are judged on their artistic merit, but things that are judged as a result of the fact that they've been created by someone. So taking a photograph and converting that into a sculpture would also be an infringement of the copyright in the original work. So it's very important to decide what is it that the artist wants to do. Are you going to use that as inspiration, or are you borrowing directly from it and appropriating it? And I think that's the test. But certainly, there've been cases in quite a recent case, the Basitsana Kumalo case, where she was in the gym working out, and one of the local cycle stores here in Pretoria, someone took a photograph of her in the gym, and then they used that photograph in the promotion of, they had an advert that they ran for their business, and they used her image for that, and she successfully sued them for that, for the infringement of her personality rights. So it goes beyond just copyright. I hope that I
Oh
hope that
no,
helps. Yeah.
that is an excellent start. So you noted something very important, the availability of these images everywhere, uh, via a Google search or via
iStock photo.
that's right,
Yeah.
various social media platforms. Are there spaces where someone who again, an emerging artist who wants to utilize whatever image as inspiration, that perhaps they could go to and retrieve images which could be utilized without any potential copyright infringement issues, or any image that one retrieves from Facebook. One hears this thing's all public domain. Oh,
Yeah.
this image was in the public domain. Can you help us around that? Around
Yeah.
these platforms where these images are so freely available?
The most important thing that you need to do when you get access to any images on any social media platform or on any website or any resource, online resource that makes images or literary works. You know, the universities, for example, have online libraries where you can get access to the information without having to pay a license fee for the use of those images, is read the terms of use. It's the most important thing. I mean, for example, one of the online databases where you can download images from is a website called iStockPhoto.com. And a lot of designers and a lot of advertising agencies use images from those databases for, like, if you do like a brochure for your business, you'll see 3 people looking out of a window, looking like they belong in a building, and you'll wonder, where did they get that? Those are not our people, and that's not our building. Well, they get it from iStock Photo. And websites like that make images available have very strict terms of use. And more often than not, one of the terms of use is you can only use it for non-commercial use. So if you're deciding to use an image from a website like that, and you're going to do something for yourself, or then that's absolutely fine. But if you're going to turn it into something that you can commercialize afterwards, then the use of that image is prohibited unless you sign on and you pay a license fee. Something that's really amazing is the National Gallery in London has the most amazing open database. And but it's very clearly defined how they have the right to give that access to you. Because remember, when you own copyright in something, it's a very restrictive right. Only the person who owns the copyright has the right to reproduce the work, adapt the work, and basically copy their own work, transform their work, make derivative works from their work. Nobody else has the right to do that unless they give that right to someone. And what the National Gallery has done is the works that are available and that can be directly accessed through the National Gallery's website, those are all works where they've basically been licensed to do it. And only the images that have been licensed, or the images that fall outside of copyright protection. Because remember, the Mona Lisa, for example, copyright in that artistic work would have expired years ago, because copyright is only valid for a certain period of time, which is why you'll see sometimes the Mona Lisa with a bandana and $100 note slapped on a cheek or something, because it's in that area of it's free for you to use that particular image. So it's very important to understand that all of those, Facebook is the same, Instagram, Twitter, they all have, or X, they all have terms of use. If you're going to use an image or you're going to download matter from those particular, you need to be 100% aware of exactly what you're doing. Just an interesting example, for example, is that, I don't know if you know, but the copyright in the original Mickey Mouse drawing, the very first drawing that Walt Disney did of Mickey Mouse that appeared in a movie, a little cartoon called Steamboat Willie, The drawing was done in 1928, and the copyright expired in January this year in that particular image. But it's important to understand that there will be copyright in other versions of that, later versions. And then, of course, there are also trademark rights. So there will be a trademark registered for that particular image. So I feel like I've gone a little bit round in circles, but it's important to understand what are you looking at?
Yeah.
What are you looking at using? Because if the image that you're using contains a brand name or a trademark, that should be a big red flag. Andy Warhol could do pop art of Campbell's soup cans because there was authorization to do that. When he made silk screens of Prince's image for the Condé Nast Vanity Fair publication, he used a photograph that Linda Goldsmith was a photographer, had taken of Prince, and he made the silk screens direct from that. The photographer sued the Andy Warhol Foundation for copyright infringement. And his defense of fair use, which is quite a hot topic because that's probably going to be your next question.
That's right. And maybe can I hand over to Kate here?
Yes.
Because there's this aspect, yes, fair use, but within our realm, of art making as artistic license. So Kate, it's something that we kind of brought up into artistic license.
Yes. So before we just get to that point, I would just like to ask something that I just actually thought about now during this conversation. So I think we all agree. So obviously there are very specific images that image is copyrighted. So the image as a whole. What happens if you actually use little bits and pieces of it? Not necessarily the whole image, does that still apply then?
So that is what we call a legal quandary. The courts have, and it's one of those things where courts will go around in circles trying to decide to what extent has there been copying, and is it how much do I need to copy to be in trouble? Is there like a safe, like a gray zone that I can sail into? Because sometimes we are asked by people who say, well, isn't there this golden rule that if you change something like 20%, then you're okay? And the lawyers are going, please, no, you're definitely not okay. Don't do that. It's not qualitative. I mean, quantitative, it's qualitative. Those are two terrible words to say. I'm so glad I had a cup of tea before I said them. So the test isn't how much of something, but is the essence the issue. So it can be the tiniest little thing. And I'm trying to think of a very good example.
Maybe if you're using a very specific part of a trademark or something.
No. So the trademarks that's a separate issue. So if we try and distinguish between different intellectual property rights, the trademarks are registered. Remember, that's also the big difference between trademarks and copyright.
Yes.
Which is why, on a trademark perspective, it's often easier to enforce your rights, because if you have it registered, you just show your certificate and you say, well, and this will tie into your last, maybe one of your other questions about how do you go about protecting your copyright. But so with trademarks, to determine whether there's been trademark infringement, you will decide whether somebody is using a trademark or a mark.
Yes.
And whether that mark is identical or confusingly similar to the registered mark, and if it's being used in relation to the same goods or services for which the mark is registered. I'm now really getting into legal speak here. But for copyright, if you're saying that, is your question rather that, I mean, I'm looking at the beautiful painting behind you, and I'm saying if someone used just a portion of that painting as their inspiration to create something new, would that in and of itself be an infringement of the copyright in that original artistic work? And the simple answer is, it's a qualitative test. To what extent can you say that? Because I think everybody accepts that there's a level of appropriation and a level of borrowing that happens. But to what extent is what has been created still done by someone's own independent effort and skill, because that's the test for originality. There's no definition in the Act for what do you need, because the first thing with copyright is, oh, it must be original. And people go like, well, what does original mean? Because there's no definition for original in the Act. And original is not like with a patent or an invention where you have to show it's inventive or it's novel or anything like that. Originality, the courts have decided, just means I'd used my own effort and skill to create something. And even if I borrowed a percentage of that from something else as my inspiration, that's not necessarily copyright infringement. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. It certainly does, and Kate, maybe if you, I will then segue into that question of artistic license, because this is one of the things, or creative license, that I would even admit here at the university, we say, yes, as artists, this is one of almost your God-given rights, that you use your creativity almost as a social service, and therefore you are able to comment on sometimes very difficult topics and very challenging situations and scenarios. Sometimes even ethically, there have been issues in the past where artists represented various rites of passage, for example, and then certain communities came back and say, no, you don't have the authority or the permission to represent that. And obviously artists always fall back on that notion of artistic license. So what are the limits of this idea of artistic license? Because it exists. One of the famous quotes, it's usually attributed to Picasso, but it was actually T.S. Eliot who noted that an amateur is the one who copies, but a professional steals, right? So that whole idea of changing something to the point where it's now your thing. Yes, you might have borrowed something, but it's now your thing. What are the limits in terms of what artists can do? Those artists that are kind of pushing the boundaries of copyright.
So this is where it's possibly one of the most difficult questions to answer, because in general, there's no limit. If you think about it, if as an artist, you have the right to use your creative skill to create something. And just to go back to what we said earlier, and if your inspiration is something that has triggered you to do something, then you have to first establish what was the inspirational thing that triggered you. And if it's another work of art, or if it's a piece of music or whatever, how you use that and create something of your own from that may not necessarily be an infringement of the rights in the original works. And that's where the fair dealing comes in and is very important. And in the US, it's called fair use, and in South Africa, it's called fair dealing. And fair dealing is one of the exceptions to copyright infringement. Just basically, it's a bit more complicated than that, but it's basically a defense to copyright infringement. And there have been some fantastic US examples, and we don't have any really, I don't want to say exciting, but great sort of South African examples. But in South Africa, they say the copyright in the artistic work will not be infringed if there is fair dealing under certain circumstances. And those are restrictive, very, very restrictive. It's like if the work is part of judicial proceedings, if it's for your own private study or your own private use, or if it's for research purposes, or if it's for a critique of an artwork, for example, or another work that would fall under the exception in the Act. So it's very restrictive. It's not the same in the US, where fair use has wider has far wider definitions and wider applications. So under the current South African Copyright Act, if you want to raise that as a defense and say, well, my artistic and my creative license leads me to this defense of fair dealing, you can only raise it if you're going to use it in relation to those specific things. All it will turn on again is whether or not the extent of the infringement would be an infringement under the Act. In other words, how much have you borrowed? How much have you used? Because remember, the creative and artistic license is not a it's not a defense to any form of copyright infringement. It will be the defense that you will use in order to say that you have the right to create this work, and most importantly, that it was original, that you created it with your own effort and skill. So on its own, it won't stand up past muster, but it is the thing that you will use in order to prove that you own the rights and that you created something yourself. You didn't just take something entirely from someone else. In fact, I think artistic and creative license is probably the backbone of creative talent, because that's really what everything hinges on, and if that is what is required to prove originality in a work, then you're halfway there. If someone wants to take steps against you.
That is so amazing. Kate, perhaps you can take on the last question around how artists can protect their
Yeah, I think after this discussion, I was just like, oh, maybe you shouldn't even be using an image.
Inspirational.
Yeah. But yes, and as Funza just mentioned, I think that's the other side. What do you do as an artist? How can you actually protect your images from being unlawfully used? If you could maybe chat to us about that a bit.
The first and most important thing is to record your rights. So, and it's the one thing that you can't overemphasize, because it's, as I said, it's not like other forms of intellectual property right that are tangible and that you can register, where you get a certificate that proves you own the rights. If you have to enforce your copyright, so you're a young artist, you've created this beautiful sculpture, you've got your own website, you've got your sculptures advertised on your website. Then you go on a Saturday morning and you walk through a market, and there you see your own sculpture. Somebody's taken it and they've copied it, maybe not completely, but you're going like, there's no way they could have created that without reference to mine. Now it's a scramble, because if you want to take action to enforce your copyright in your original artistic work against that person who's infringing your rights, you first have to jump through a whole lot of hoops. You first have to prove that you are the owner of the copyright in your original work. And that's like a legal debate. You get authors and you get owners, and owners can be different depending on the nature of the works and how and when the work was created. But if you're a sculptor, you're the author. Those first authors are generally the first owners of the copyright. So unless you've given away that right to someone else, you will own the rights. But you've got to prove it. You've also got to prove that the work is original. You've got to prove that when it was created. You've got to prove that you're domiciled in a Berne Convention country like South Africa, which is an international convention that protects copyright. So there are a whole lot of steps that you've got to take. So the best thing to do every single time you create a work is create a database for that work. Say, on such and such a date, this work was created in Pretoria, in South Africa. It was created by me, Funzo Sidogi. I confirm that it was created through my own independent effort and skill. I did not infringe on any copyright when I created this work. And keep images of it, take photographs of the work that you've created, and keep a database, because you're going to need it if you ever want to enforce your rights. If you have a website where you have your artistic works advertised or promoted on your website, make it clear on your website at the bottom, all the copyright in all the works that you see on this particular website are owned by X person, and give a date for it, because that is the best way in order to record that you own the rights, because there is no other way unless you make a cinematograph film, because copyright in cinematograph films can be registered. The Act makes provision for it, but it's not mandatory. You don't have to. And those are registered at SIPC, same place where we register patents, trademarks, and designs. So that's the most important thing, is to keep clear and good records of every single work that you've created. If you're wanting a gallery to sell your works, because that's often what people say. So now I've created these works. We often get asked by artists, well, I've been sent a contract and all of a sudden it's all been taken off my hands. I no longer, and the contract says I don't own the rights anymore. The gallery can print, they can publish, they can do everything. There's very little that can be done about that, because that is the nature of the industry. So when you want a particular big Johannesburg gallery to support you, it's very likely that they're going to ask you to either assign the copyright to them, or even if it's for a limited period of time, or to give them a license to use. Remember, when you are the owner of the copyright in an artistic work and you give a license to someone else to use that work, you still own the copyright in that work. You're just giving someone the license to use an image, or like an adaptation or a reproduction of that work, like when they print a brochure for your upcoming exhibition or something. You still maintain the rights. It's the same as when somebody buys Punzo's sculpture. Punzo still owns the copyright in that sculpture. The person who buys the sculpture only owns the object of the sculpture. So you don't lose those rights. So that's it. Proper record keeping is vital and critical. And make sure that whenever you promote your own works, that you indicate that you own the copyright. Sign your works. Put the date on your works, even if it's on the back or on the base of a sculpture or wherever. Assert your rights so that everybody can see that you're asserting your rights.
But I suppose also, sorry, Funza, sure. The other side is also that, you know, for us as a competition, we need permission from the artists to be able to use their, you know, so
of course,
you know, I think artists also just have to be aware of the fact that, you know, that those agreements must be in place, wherever they go. They must actually they must always ask for an agreement.
Yes, you're safer. Yes. You definitely are safer. Yes. So if someone wants to promote, and there's no contract or no say, even if you say, I want to insist that there is some written agreement between us, so that, and I think it's also important, possibly for commissioned works, where you are engaging with the gallery for works that you haven't even produced yet, you know, where if you're commissioned to create, Funza must make 5 sculptures for a gallery, you know, and he hasn't even created those works yet. Keep proper records of each and every one that you've created, and update the gallery with that information as and when the works are produced.
So this has been so insightful. The point that I wanted to just pick up on was that even in an instance where you sell the work, you still retain the copyright as an artist. And so the advice for emerging artists is that, because obviously there's that need to sell the work in order to generate an income, is that as you've so eloquently noted, keep a record of all of that. And especially because the nature of the industry, of the visual arts industry, is that your earlier first works usually become your most kind of valuable, iconic works. So to kind of maintain a record of, oh, this is the work that I did 25 years ago. And it's so sad sometimes, even as we Kate and myself, we've done research projects and written about certain artists, and you go to them and they say, oh, I don't have an image of my work that I did 20 years ago, 25 years ago, but I know it's in the secondary market and this is happening and all of that. So in terms of the auction sales, so this is really important advice for emerging artists to keep a record of that.
And we have tools at our disposal nowadays. I'm trying to think. I can't even remember. Say 40 years ago, everything would have had to be manually recorded. You would. Now this call that we're having is recorded. There's a date, there's a time that's attributed to it. So access to those records is as important as creating your own access to your own, because those are your rights. If you don't record them properly, it becomes so much harder to enforce them when the time arises. So
Right.
So that's.
This has been absolutely amazing, Jenny. Thank you so much for.
I'd love to chat to you for a long time.
Yeah,
I've still got a lot of questions.
We have so many.
Anytime.
And I'm sure that there'll be many more questions from artists, and we do encourage you, if you have any question that perhaps you would like Jenny to address, please post that on the platforms, and we would be more than happy to prepare a response for you. But I think this has really empowered the potential entrants to really understand the ways in which they can utilize images in a responsible manner. And there's honestly no excuse, because the information is available. And as you've noted, each platform has terms of use that we need to be aware of as artists. So again, this is an encouragement to of course use that artistic and creative license, but to use it responsibly, so that you do not find yourself in.
And if you're not sure, just ask. Sometimes you'll see something and you'll think, you'll see a variety of artworks and you'll think, like, those look very similar. There are these trends, and you see these trends coming through, and there's a reason why they look similar. Unique, guys.
Of course, and thank you for that, Jenny. You speak like one of the judges. If you want your work to do well in the competition, indeed be unique, and we are looking forward to those unique submissions.
So good luck to everyone. It's amazing.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks. Any closing remarks, Kate? And then.
Jenny, this was wonderful. Thank you very, very much. We really do appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing what happens in the competition. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure.
That's right. And so our next info session, we will be dealing, as we noted before, we'll be dealing with why my work or your work was not submitted. So again, that's an important discussion that Kate and myself will be having. So please make sure to join us. And again, just to remind you, all the sessions from last year are also available, still available, so you can check those out. And looking forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.